All right, so welcome everybody to another episode of Chatting with NDGS Paleo. Today is Friday, April 17th, which means we're almost to the weekend. Weekends kind of still matter, I think, a little bit, but thanks for joining us again. Today, we are going to be chatting about the fossil record and evolutionary history of dogs, which is why Ripley is joining us right here. Normally she's in the background on the couch. You might have seen her once in a while. Along with her buddy Hicks, who's now worried that her friend is gone. But Ripley's a coonhound, and she's very interested to learn all about her history. So we do get a lot of fossil dogs here in North Dakota, but what we have done is brought in someone that knows even more about fossil dogs than any of us do to talk about their evolutionary history today. So joining us today is Amy Atwater. She is the collections manager at the Museum of the Rockies out in Bozeman, Montana, so very close to us here in North Dakota. A lot of the same rocks, a lot of the same fossils. Now, Amy got her bachelor's degree from the University of Oregon and her master's degree from the University of Texas at Austin. So she's going to talk to us about the fossil history of dogs and a little bit about modern dogs as well. And we're all excited to hear what's going on. So thanks for joining us, Amy, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Clint. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm very excited. My own dog is asleep right now, so she is not participating. It's fine. We'll get her later. But I want to thank everyone for joining me today to talk about dogs. I'm going to see if I can share my screen to be able to show you this PowerPoint presentation. But we will be talking about fossil dogs. This is a cast of a fossil dog that I'm studying. So we're going to chat about this as the bone crushing dog, talk about what exactly that means. And then we're also going to be getting a chance to talk about our modern dogs towards the end, like this is the coyote skull. And so we'll touch on modern dogs too. But I'll go over that. So let me see if I can successfully share my screen here. Awesome. All right. So Bad to the Bone Crushing Dog is my very cheesy title for this talk. We are going to be talking about the evolution of dogs, specifically those that were in Montana, as I am, again, as Clint said, a paleontologist here in Montana. So a lot of the specimens we're going to be talking about today do come from Montana and are housed in the fossil collections at Museum of the Rockies. So again, I am the paleontology collections manager and registrar at Museum of the Rockies and Montana State University here in Bozeman, Montana. That means it's my job to keep track of all of the fossils we have in collections. We have approximately 400,000 individual fossils in collections that I keep track of and make available for visiting researchers or send out to other researchers for study. You can email me if you're interested about collections management or about Museum of the Rockies. I have my email address here, make it available later. You can follow me on social media too. I'm active on Instagram and on Twitter, and you're gonna hear a lot about dogs. So without further ado.
A little bit about me. You already heard I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Oregon. I did grow up in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon, and so that's me in the big photo on the left there with the red sweater and the bowl cut. I would spend my summers in the John Day Fossil Beds in Eastern Oregon. I would go to summer camps that were sponsored through the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, which is OMSI. In fact, both my brother and I loved it so much that we in fact became counselors when we were old enough to as well. And that's where I really fell in love with fossil mammals in particular, out of all things paleontology. You can see an oreodont skull
is being pointed to here. Who doesn't love oreodonts? Maybe we can do an oreodont talk at another time. So that's some of my background is really a lot of fossil mammals, and thanks to the state of Oregon. So today, just to give you a little outline about where we'll be headed, we're going to be talking about dogs in general, dogs of Montana, also, dogs of the United States, dogs of the world. Then we're going to be talking about the evolution of dogs and essentially where dogs fall in their family tree with other carnivorans. Then we're going to dive deep into the fossil record of dogs, where we're going to talk about all of the 3 subfamilies of canids, starting with the oldest, the Hesperocyonines, and then we'll get into the Borophagines, or the bone-crushing dogs, and some of the current research that I'm doing at Museum of the Rockies. And then we're going to end with talking about modern canines, the dogs that we still have around us today. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some questions if there's time for that as well. All right, so this slide really represents Montana, specifically Bozeman. Bozeman is a dog town. These are all doggos in the Bozeman area. You're either my friends or my family members' dogs or my own dog. My dog is Freya there on the far right, the husky. And Montana is dogtown in more than one way, really. If we think about it, not only do we have modern canines running around, but we have fossil canids, fossil dogs underneath our feet, especially here in Southwest Montana, which is where we get a lot of those juicy Cenozoic rocks that are full of wonderful fossil dogs. So those specimens that you see in the bottom of the screen are going to be fossils that we are going to talk about during this presentation today, and range from quite a bit of skull material, but also we have some postcrania I get to attempt to talk about. I mostly know about teeth. So those are some of the specimens we'll see, as well as some more. But before we do that, we really need to understand what the heck is going on with dogs and their family tree. And so that is represented here. This is a tree, evolutionary tree, if you will, on the right. This is a picture by artist Ray Troll. It really is the bear family tree, but I cut out the bear part because it does show all carnivorans in this really beautiful, well-formatted way that I really like. So you can see that some of the branches have broken off. Those represent the extinct branches, and we can see all the different critters, from bears to hyenas to cats and pandas and seals and otters, and all those things are all related in this carnivoran family tree. So that is an order of mammals, the carnivora, and dogs are a part of that. So carnivora is a group of mammals, and it is split into two subgroups. Here we can see those two subgroups, each of the columns here. On the left, we have Feliforma, the cat-like carnivorans, and on the right, we have the Caeniforma, which is the dog-like carnivorans. Now, I am not too embarrassed to admit that I only learned a few years ago that hyenas are actually more closely related to cats than they are to dogs. I don't know if that's going to blow anybody else's mind, but I know that that one took me for a roller coaster ride when I learned about that in graduate school. So all of these animals are united, even though I get questions all the time. Oh, it really is something like a raccoon really related to something like a bear? And the answer is yes, even though they look drastically different, they are all united by having these characteristics in their claws and in their teeth that are adapted for chasing and catching and eating other animals. Whether or not they all do that, we will talk about, but that's what their anatomy is well adapted for. So what part of the anatomy do we see this adaptation for slicing and shearing meat? Well, really, we see that in the teeth. So all carnivorans have a very special group of teeth in their mouth that we call carnassials. So this is actually a combination of a tooth from the lower jaw and the upper jaw. So it's a molar on the bottom here. So on the upper right of your screen, you can see a puma skull. And you can see two teeth that are pointed out, the premolar on top and the molar on the bottom. They both look like jagged mountain ranges. They're very long, extended mountain ranges looking like teeth. And what these teeth are well adapted for, as you can see in the bottom photo, as they go over each other, they're well adapted to be like shearing, like a pair of scissors almost, for shearing and slicing meat with that elongated mountain range blade that you see. So all carnivorans have this feature. You can see it in things like a raccoon, you can see it in your dog, you can see it in your cat, you can see it in a ferret. They all have these special teeth that we see and we can recognize as being carnivorans. Now, it gets complicated because some carnivorans don't actually eat any meat at all, and other carnivorans are actually omnivorous and they eat both plants and animals. So it gets a little confusing. I created this slide to kind of illustrate the confusion with this carnivoran versus carnivore. So here on the left, you can see a non-carnivorous carnivoran, the panda bear. So the panda bear is a carnivore, but it does not eat meat. It has teeth that are well adapted for eating meat, and it eats bamboo, which is a plant. It's actually a grass. So pandas are an example of a carnivoran who doesn't actually eat meat at all. Now on the right, we have a non-carnivoran, the orca whale, swimming towards and to attack the seal. So here we have a carnivorous non-carnivoran that is trying to attack these orca whale or to attack this actual carnivoran, which is, it's a little confusing, right? You can have teeth that are well adapted for eating meat and not eat meat, and you can have teeth that are not part of the carnivoran family tree and still go out there and eat meat, right? Like obviously dinosaurs and other animals like that, like they're not carnivorans even though they are carnivores. So to conclude that, which I think I just made a little more confusing, that's okay, we could talk about it. Carnivorans, those are an order of mammals circled here, cat-like and dog-like. The closest living relatives of carnivorans are pangolins, which are very fun creatures that kind of think they are dinosaurs, but they're actually mammals. So carnivorans, an order of mammals. Carnivores eat meat. So we have a dietary class versus an order of mammals. So that can be just a fun tongue twister to share with your friends. All right, now we're going to dive into the fossil record of dogs. This here shows on the right, this is by artist Megan Weatherall, depiction of, at the bottom are our oldest fossil mammals from, this is all the Cenozoic time period, and so we see the oldest part of that being the Paleocene, and at the top we see the most recent, ending with this Pleistocene time period with the ice ages. And we see the earliest carnivorans arising in North America during the Eocene epoch. So that's the one right after the Paleocene. It's got the turtle in there, Orodromius, Petrophilus, Runia, good fossil primate, what? So that's when we first see the first fossil dogs, is approximately between 56 to 34 million years ago during the Eocene time period. What was so special about the Eocene? Well, the Eocene is marked by a warming trend that made even the northernmost regions of the globe, and southernmost for that matter, actually hospitable to almost all mammalian life, including primates. So now up where we have sea ice and we have actual ice formed at the poles, at this time period during the Eocene, the climate was so warm that there were actually lush tropical rainforests up there, and it was probably an ice-free world. And that allowed a lot of animals such as primates and dogs and cats and things like rabbits and horses and all hooved animals to really blossom during this Eocene time period. So that's why we see dogs showing up then. Now, if we look at the dog family tree within Carnivora, right, that order of mammals, well, the dog family tree is Canidae, and it contains 3 subfamilies. We have the Hesperocyonines, the Borophagines, and the Canines, so modern canines. I'm going to try to do my best to not mess up true dog and fossil dog as I say all of this, but if you get confused, please ask a question, and I will try to fix that. I can say the same thing over and over and not hear that it's very confusing. So out of these 3 subfamilies, 2 of them are completely extinct to this day. So the Hesperocyonines and the Borophagines, so including my bone-crushing dog, these are all completely extinct. The Borophagines went extinct about 3 million years ago. And it's the only subfamily of dogs that we have left are our true dogs, the canines, and that includes all of our domesticated dogs. That includes all wild dogs, all wolves, all foxes, and animals of that sort. So we'll talk about those too. To give you a sense of geologic time, to show you kind of this diagram from Wang and Tedford, you can see that through geologic time, this kind of depicts when we see the relative diversity and abundance of the different groups. So in this photo in the upper right-hand corner, those are the Hesperocyonines, and you can see that they arose during the early Eocene and really had most of their diversity seen in the Oligocene time period. And then we can see in the blue in the middle, we see that Borophagines, they stem from a Hesperocyon ancestor, and they really, really do well, especially during the Miocene time period. And then we can also see that we have modern dogs on the far left in the yellow. And while they do appear pretty early on, we don't see relative abundances increase of modern dogs until the other 2 groups of dogs are completely extinct. So that really means that the Plio-Pleistocene has been a period of adaptive radiation for modern dogs, now that the environment is available thanks to the extinction of the other 2 groups of dogs. So the first dog, see here's our first dog in quote marks, could be debated whether you would really call this a dog or not. It is right there nestled into the base of that dog family tree. This one is a shout out to my Texas days. This fossil dog was found near where I used to do field work in West Texas. So this dog is called Hesperocyonines wilsoni, named after Jack Wilson, who did incredible paleontology work in West Texas. So this specimen is about 40 million years old. So that's smack dab in that Eocene time period for age. And characteristics that we see Hesperocyon, that we know that it makes it a dog or within the Canidae family. There's some specific characteristics. One of the main things that makes a dog is that in their upper teeth, they do not have a wisdom tooth. They don't have third molars on their upper teeth. So it's like if you only had wisdom teeth on your lowers, but you probably had them taken out, like my poor teeth were taken. All right, so also we have an adaptation for the ear. So an enlarged bony bulla, and my screen I'm sure is pretty small, so this might not be that effective, but this is that bony bulla there at the back of the skull. You can see it well in diagram B in the one below. In the photo below, it's that rounded portion behind the teeth. So that is to protect that inner ear and the middle ear there, and seeing that enlargement and seeing the specific type of bone that covers up that bony bulla is another characteristic that unites all of these dogs. So some scientists argued for a long time that Hesperocyon may have been more of on the line to mustelids and other carnivorans, but lately researchers have indicated that it's very primitive, but it does seem to be falling more closely on the dog branch of the family tree. I have done field work in Big Bend National Park out where this fossil, near where this fossil was discovered. And this is a canine, a fossil fang, you could say, that I discovered there back in about 2016. And I like to think maybe it was from Hesperocyon. Wouldn't that have been really, really fun? I think it's still being prepped back in Austin, Texas, though. So hopefully we'll hear more about that tooth in the next rounds of research. But when we talk about where Hesperocyon falls onto the family tree of dogs, we see it really there at the base before we get any branching to the Hesperocyonines or the Borophagines. So it's actually going to be closer to the base before they all radiated out. And if we were to follow that back towards the carnivoran family tree, we would pretty quickly run into bears, which are very closely related to dogs, and Hesperocyon is more closely related to the dog side of this than the bear side of this. But bears, and there were bear dogs, which are at the base of the split between dogs and bears. And if you really want just, I mean, packs of bears is something nightmares if you ask me. So I'm mostly afraid of bear dogs in that, for that regard. All right, Hesperocyonines. So the name means Western dogs. A lot of them are known from the Midwest or the Western United States. They were thought to be fairly small-bodied, though they were believed to be capable of hunting prey larger than themselves. And some paleontologists believe that this indicates that they were probably pack hunting, and they were able to take down prey larger than themselves at this stage because they were coordinated with each other. So they were able to do that. And that is a very dog characteristic that we see in dogs today. So this could be indication that that behavior is very, very basal or very, very at the base of the dog family tree. And dogs have been coordinating with others for a while. Hesperocyonines also gave rise to the two other subfamilies of canids. So both our Borophagines and modern dogs stem from these guys in this slide here. So they're like the dog gave life to all the other dogs, and you can ask for Hesperocyonines for your friends that you hopefully have at home as well. They were extinct by the Middle Miocene, so they did not persist nearly as long as the Borophagines did, and perhaps it was competition with Borophagines or maybe even cats and other carnivorans at that stage that forced them into extinction. I read this in a lot of Wang and Tedford's work that they possibly resembled modern civets, which is the animal on the bottom left of your screen here. I like to imagine this just because I had no idea that civets were so rock and roll with all of their different colorations. I mean, we've got like a raccoon face and like cheetah and then kind of like a baby tapir thing going on. And I'm a fan. I like to think that early dogs would have been that flamboyant with their coat colors. That makes me really happy. And I hope people illustrate that in their paleo art. I'm not artistic, so I can't do it. Please, someone help me. Okay, so when it comes to Hesperocyonines, I only have one fossil of these guys from Museum of the Rockies to show you. There are other places in the country, especially in the Dakotas and Nebraska, where you see a lot of Hesperocyonine specimens, but this is just one specimen. So this is a jaw, a lower jaw, and part of the cranium, part of the skull. So here are 3 views of this specimen. It's MOR 2043. So it would have had a very relatively flat face, a low profile. It does still have that, it does have one of the inner ears, the middle ears protected there. You can see that in the furthest photo on the right. You can see the coverings of the inner ear there. We also see the characteristics in its teeth. It doesn't have an upper third molar on its upper dentition. So that's how we know this specimen is in fact a dog. It does still need to be formally described. It was just recently prepared by Carrie Ansell here at Museum of the Rockies. So I'm hoping that if I ever finish my other Borophagine project, that I can get some help to figure out what's going on with this Hesperocyonine specimen too. It's approximately 30 million years old. It was actually found in close association with an oreodont and a rabbit, very close to Pipestone, Montana. So we do have some other critters that were found from the same locality. Okay, we've gotten to the second subfamily of dogs, the Borophagines. So these canids are what we call the bone-crushing dogs. And they were very prolific during the Miocene time period in particular. So they live only in North America. Same with the Hesperocyonines for that matter too. They radiated and evolved here in North America. They were endemic, meaning they're just found here. These fossil dogs lived about 36 million years ago till about 2.5 million years ago, so they had quite a long evolutionary history. This is perhaps why we have such a great fossil record of these fossil canines. Canids, I should say, not canines, Amy. See, I started doing it. So these ones are known in particular for their powerful jaws and teeth. And I feel a special connection to the Borophagines and their bone-crushing jaws and teeth, especially this photo that you see on the left side of your screen here by Mauricio Antone. I saw this and it just rang this bell in my head because I knew I had this photo of my own bone-crushing dog in the exact same pose as this extinct bone-crushing dog. And again, this is kind of confusing. My dog Freya is not a true bone-crushing dog. She is a canine, not a Borophagine, but she can also crunch through bone. So that is really just a popularized name for them as well. So again, if there's confusion, hopefully we can clarify at the end. But this is Freya, my own bone-crushing dog, and looks a lot like what bone-crushing dogs probably looked like in the Miocene, but probably she has a little more fur, maybe. So the question I get a lot is, okay, well, how do we know they ate bone? You're talking all this stuff about, man, they ate all this bone. How do we know that? Well, I went to the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology meeting back in 2018, was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was so tickled to go and hear a talk by now one of my co-authors, Xiaoming Wang, and his colleagues that was titled this: "The Proof is in the Pooping." And that was the name of their talk and their paper that actually demonstrated that there are indeed chunks of bone in the fossilized feces of Borophagine dogs. So the scientific name for fossil feces is a coprolite. And what these scientists did is they actually CT scanned a bunch of known Borophagine coprolites, and then they segmented out all of the different things that were in this ancient poop. And a lot of it was bone. A lot of it was truly bone. And it did confirm, in fact, that their teeth are not only well adapted for it, but their poop is showing they actually did it. They were eating bone. So To digress a little bit, this specimen is MOR 8673. It's a specimen I'm doing research on. And even though I just was talking about the bone crushing aspect, this dog doesn't show that extreme morphology. We'll talk about in the slides about other Borophagines. But they were a very diverse group of dogs. So even though they all are called bone crushing dogs, some of them were more omnivorous and eating a lot of plant matter, and then some were doing this hypercarnivory thing. So there was an array of different diversity there within the Borophagine. So the specimen you see in front of you kind of falls in the middle of that. It is a complete skull and jaws. It has every single tooth position preserved. My own dog doesn't have all of her teeth preserved, and she's alive. So the fact that this fossil dog is was able to preserve all of its teeth, and they're all unworn, they're pristine. This dog was probably about 1 year old when it died and when it was fossilized, because every tooth position is present. None of them are baby teeth, and none of them show any amount of wear whatsoever. So it really is a treat to work with a specimen this pristine and this complete. It was discovered in the mid-2000s, just about 15 minutes west of where I am sitting right now in Gallatin Valley here in Montana. It was actually excavated and prepared by the ALF Museum and the Webb Schools and Don Lofgren. So shout out and thanks to them for their beautiful work. And it is from a Middle Miocene locality, and we just actually ran some detrital zircon geochronology analyses from the site, and we know that the site is exactly 15.3 million years old. So that's how old this specimen is about 15 million years old, which we had a good idea of that based on the other animals that have been found there as well. So the question that still remains throughout all of our analyses has been, is this a new species of Borophagine or not? And 8673 has been in this existential crisis for, you know, who knows how long about understanding its true nature. So some of the things that paleontologists and someone like myself who studies dogs are going to look at to determine if this is something new are a bunch of these anatomical characteristics. So things that were unique about this specimen, besides being absolutely spectacular, as I went through and I compared it to a lot of its other Borophagines that are known from the same time period from similar places, and made note of things that were similar and different. So at the top there, you can see that I'm talking about this dorsally enlarged frontal sinus. So that's essentially like getting a bit of a dome to the forehead versus kind of that flat lying nature that we saw in the Hesperocyonines. We also see this one here at the lower jaw where I'm pointing out there's a greater height of the ramus of the lower jaw than compared to a lot of specimens I've been looking at. Also, that lower jaw here doesn't have a symphyseal flange like a lot of other Borophagines from this time period does. And also, importantly, to unite it within its group, its ectotympanic, which is part of the ear, does form a full ring, which helps us understand how well it's related to other Borophagines too. If we look at the teeth, my favorite part, yes, the teeth. We can also see a lot of these characteristics that are making it very clear that it is a Borophagine that appears to be a new species. It probably belongs to the Paratomarctos genus. It looks like it's a new species because we are seeing interesting characteristics in the jaws and also in having some of these shortened premolars and some not so shortened. Essentially, what we're also realizing by doing this character analysis is that while 8673 was definitely a big medium to large size Borophagine, it hadn't gone into full and that's my dog shaking off, hypercarnivory mode. And we know that because some of the premolars, the lower left there, you can see that the P4 is not enlarged relative to the P3. When we get into the really hypercarnivorous Borophagines, they make that P3 even more bulbous to really crunch through bone. And also with that, the carnassial, the P4 and the M1, we see lengthening of that blade in the bigger critters. So what this specimen is telling us is A, it's probably a new species, and B, it seems to be starting the trajectory towards hypercarnivory, but doesn't actually represent one of the more hypercarnivorous groups. So if folks have more questions about that, we can talk more about the phylogenetic genetic analysis. I cut some of that out since lines can be less fun than photos. Hey, Freya. Oh, no, that's another dog. Don't lick that. That's, oh, and there's my dog licking the other dog's skulls. That's probably cannibalism. Go lay down. So, all right, moving on from 8673, I want to talk about another borophagine. I'm going to cover up this box of bones before my bone-crushing dog discovers it. Another borophagine that we have at Museum of the Rockies, and this one is really rock and roll, guys. This one is very, whoa, hypercarnivory. So Allurodon montanensis, this is a specimen, MOR 1724. It was published in 2004. It's only known from Montana. And Allurodon, so that genus Allurodon, is depicted here on the left in this image by Mauricio Antone. It's the larger of the dogs that's snarling at the other dogs, because this was one of the really big, really hypercarnivorous. And when I say hypercarnivorous, I mean they excelled at eating and hunting meat, essentially, other animals, that they weren't doing an omnivory thing like other dogs and bears do. So Allurodon montanensis, what we see is that it is much larger than the specimen I just showed you, 8673. It's a little older, but around the same time period. It's about 16 million years old. And when I say hypercarnivorous, I want to point out in the image on the right that there is a lengthened shearing blade on that carnassial. So that big mountain long looking tooth there has an even longer blade. What we also see when you go towards hypercarnivory is you don't need these flat grinding molars in the back anymore, because you're not chewing berries and roots and tubers. You just are dealing with meat and bone. So we see a reduction in the grinding aspects or the surface area of the molars. And what we do see an expansion though in the premolars, specifically, as well as the molars. We see increase in tooth size that really helps them withstand the physical force of the blows that it takes to chew through bone. So those are some of those adaptations that we look at in an animal to know that it had the ability to crunch through bone. And a lot of modern carnivoran researchers actually study bite force in modern animals and try to infer it into animals like borophagines as well. So in line with that research, I'm going to try to show us this video about hypercarnivory. And it is a little graphic, but it's not too bad. It's a hyena in captivity eating a pig neck. I do encourage you for volume, though if you don't like the sound of crunching bone, I discourage you. I want to show you this. Hyenas have dentition similar to borophagines in that it's well adapted for crunching through bone. So I want to show you how quickly this hyena goes through this pig neck in captivity. It's about 30-40 seconds long. That's it. And that's it. It is pretty quick work and here we go back to full screen here. No problem, right? I mean, it didn't even hesitate to crunch through any of that bone. It doesn't have any, it just turns it to the side, crunch. And it's like, how many licks does it take to get inside? I mean, they don't even bother. They just crunch right to the center. and they have teeth that are well adapted. And some modern dogs, I know a lot of folks who say, oh, my dog can go right through bone like that too. So a lot of dogs do have this ability, but hyenas have really enhanced it with the enlargement of their molars and premolars to really help with that crunching through bone. You heard all the bone crunching, huh? Yeah. So this is another specimen of Borophagine at Museum of the Rockies. It's very similar to the first specimen, 8673, and it's a lower jaw, and I'm hoping that when I finish writing up 8673, we can include this one as well. I just want to show that we do have more of those medium-sized Borophagines than we do of the Hypercarnivory ones. And we do have one small Borophagine. So this is called Little Dog. This is a specimen that is also from Southwest Montana. It has the lower jaw well preserved, as well as quite of the upper teeth. And I also have a complete leg. I have a femur, tib, fib, quite a few of the foot bones as well, a few vertebra, and as well. This one has tentatively been identified as Desmosyon, though it has not been fully described either. And it just shows, again, that even in this small collection at Museum of the Rockies, we have quite a diversity of Borophagines. And if it is Desmosyon, it would be the first occurrence of that relatively rare type of Borophagine in Montana, which would be exciting. So if anyone's super interested in that, let me know. I need help. All right, so now we're going to go into canines, the dogs that survive. So these are the modern critters that we have around today. Both Borophagines, all the true bone-crushing dogs, and the Hesperocyonines are completely extinct. And now we have canines, which are essentially all modern dogs that we have around fall within the subfamily canines, the canine subfamily. So the first canines show up about 34 million years ago. So they show up, modern dogs show up, or the ancestor to modern dogs, show up pretty early in the fossil record, but they don't really diversify until much, much later. But this first dog that we identify as the earliest known canine is Leptosyon. It was very fox-like. It was small and slender, and it tended to have more elongated limbs than what we see in the Hesperocyonines and the Borophagines. And that's an important differentiation between the two extinct groups and the modern group of dogs. Modern dogs have longer, lengthier legs. And also modern dogs have a front and a hind big toe that has been highly reduced, if not completely absent at all. So that dew claw, I'm pretty sure that that's what people refer to them. Your dog, you might feel a little one, but they're not actually putting any weight. It's more vestigial, and it's kind of a relic of their evolutionary history, really. And so that's a characteristic that we see in Leptosyon and other modern canine, and then in modern canines as well. I don't know a ton about the split of of canines about 12 million years ago, but that is about when they split into Canini and Vulpini. So essentially when we look at, there's the wolf group that includes wolves, domestic dogs, coyotes, jackals, African wild dogs, weird things like the maned wolf, and South American dogs. And then the other group is all foxes. So they're their own group, and they're so cute. As a kid, I used to be so upset. I was a cat person as a child, and I was really upset that foxes were technically dogs because I really thought they looked a lot like cats, and I was very upset that they were not cats. Now I'm totally cool with it. That's fine. They're all amazing and adorable. So that split happened about 12 million years ago. Now the split that ended up into the dogs that we see and our domestic dogs must have happened a lot more recently. I am not too much of an expert on the domestication of dogs, but obviously that is something that happened probably with the gray wolf. And this specimen here on the right is one from our Pleistocene collections at Museum of the Rockies. And I'm not sure if it belongs to a fossil gray wolf or if it's a Beringia wolf. But in Montana, we do have modern wolves and as well, so it could just be a modern relative. Again, I don't know my modern dogs as well, so if anyone does, please let me know if this fossil is a Beringia wolf or a modern wolf, or how I could tell the difference. But essentially, one of these some type of wolf during these ice ages when humans are here around on the globe as well, were able to be successfully domesticated, and that is what our modern dogs all stem from, a wolf ancestor. And so we see a lot of modern canines in North America today. These are specifically some Montana ones. So we have wolves there in the upper left. We've got coyotes on the bottom, and then the beautiful fox. If I'm really lucky, sometimes I see a fox or two in my yard. They're probably out looking for the rabbits that my dog is also hunting. So I do love, we have incredible dogs around today. And I wanted to highlight that I would say you can always go visit the extinct ones, though I'm happy to help you virtually visit them right now. And you can follow me on social media to visit even more museum from home experiences. And I also wanted to do a shout out to all these other places that have a lot of fossil dogs as well, specifically the Borophagines and the Hesperocyonines. So other places that are significant, well, and with modern dogs. So if you want to talk like dire wolf, which I think Jeff has got a dire wolf skull somewhere, maybe we can, yeah. Dire wolves are very well known from the La Brea tar pits in California, in Southern California. Yes, and so that's why La Brea is, I've never actually been, but they have an entire wall of dire wolf skulls, and it looks amazing in its photos. So Southern California and then Barstow, California, we also see a lot of Borophagines from that time period. Again, a shout out to where I grew up in the John Day Fossil Beds National Monument, quite a few fossil dogs there. And then we've got a lot in the Midwest. We've got a lot in the Dakotas. We've got a lot in Badlands National Park, and we've got a lot in Nebraska as well. So lots of places to learn about fossil dogs. Also shout out to Florida. I did not know that there were that many occurrences in Florida. I'm using the paleobiology database here. So if you ever want to go and scroll, go use that resource to go see the distribution of some of your favorite fossil critters. And if we want to do a little bit, I want to thank everyone for this. And before I completely go though, I'm going to end screen sharing and show off a few specimens just over the webcam, and then hopefully open things up for questions too. Oh, and you can follow my dog Freya on Instagram, but she doesn't post very much. So heads up. Freya, 5 now, dog 5. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share. And okay, I'm just briefly going to show a Borophagine specimen. So this is a replica or a cast of that specimen you saw a bunch of photos of. So again, the carnassial complex is between this upper tooth and this lower tooth here. It's kind of hard to see. And it makes this shearing plane that allows for scissor-like slicing. And then what we also see are, we do have these back molars here that are still flat grinding surface. So another thing that we know we're not going to hypercarnivory yet. We don't have a third upper molar because this is a true dog. We do have these big canines here. And we see that. So this is that Borophagine specimen. We do have, this is that auditory bulla. So this protects that middle ear as from this in the specimen, and it is a very important character in understanding how it's related to other Borophagines. And then what seems to be interesting is the height of this part of the jaw here seems to be taller than what we see in some of the other comparative material. However, I really need to go and take this cast to an actual, yeah, see? For relative to size, this one's way taller. Yeah, that's, so Jeff has got his dire wolf skull there, our lower mandible too, and you can kind of see the relative difference compared to tooth row, that relatively the one I've got in my hand seems to have a taller ramus, which is that part of the jaw. And I'm trying to figure out if, right, if that has, it's gonna have to do with power with bite force. Oh, and that's something I wanted to show with Borophagines. Thank you, thank you. So when we look at this specimen, and see Jeff is also showing the relative length of his. My specimen has a relatively short snout, and it had, so Borophagines have been explained to me like hedge clippers before, where it's got a lot of muscle attachment back here and a lot of range of motion back here for a very strong, powerful bite. Whereas if you look at the dire wolf jaw there, we have a lot more room and more of that increase on the sagittal crest, whereas this one's got more of a nuchal crest here. Feel free to unmute too. You probably have more articulate ways of saying all of this than I do.
Okay. Can you hear me? You got me, Becky? Okay. So what she's talking about is the relative length of this lower jaw. So all of this area here, this is where those the muscles come down and allow for that power. So the longer this lower jaw is, the less power it has. So for bone crushing, you want something that's very short. Think of a pliers. So if you have a very long-ended pliers, if you, please don't do this, but just think about it. If you put your finger at the end of the pliers versus the hinge of the pliers, all of the power is down here on this end where the hinge is. If you put your finger out here, you're not going to hurt yourself very badly, but this is going to be very ouchy. Okay, so you want to, the shorter that thing is, the more mechanical advantage you get. So Borophagines, because they're trying to use all that power, shorten up that jaw, and they really have a lot of extra muscle attachment to pull that thing shut with all that power on this ascending ramus. That's why they look like that.
Thank you. Thank you. That was much more articulate. I appreciate that. And so we can have them on the same screen. This is a modern wolf lower jaw. And again, like Jeff was saying, just note the relative sizes of these and that we see shorter levers going on with the Borophagines, trying to increase their powerful bite force with having these relatively tall back of the jaw and a relatively short beginning of the jaw here. So if you compare a Borophagine skull to a modern dog, or they look more like a domesticated dog than say like a wolf because of the proportions that we see. In fact, I have a domesticated dog that, of course, I have no idea what type of dog it was because there's no records of it, but it has really similar dimensions as the Borophagine skull, but I have no idea what breed it is because it is just marked as dead dog. So it's not really helpful. I don't know what a good breed analog is yet, but probably something with a slightly shorter face and a powerful bite force. So since we're already looking at the wolf, these actually do not go together, so I'm not going to articulate them because it looks really funny. But here is a modern wolf. So also what I want to point out is that we see some doming here at the frontals, but really we're seeing more of an enhanced, relatively, of course, again, that there seems to be more doming going on here in the Borophagine, probably again having to do with bite force. So modern wolves are going to be a lot larger, at least than that Borophagine, and have slightly different aspects of their anatomy where they're putting, like it has more of a sagittal crest here than the Borophagine specimen does as well. This one is a coyote skull that unfortunately someone glued together, so I can't look at its gorgeous teeth. I need to figure out how to reverse hot glue. So if anyone knows how to reverse hot glue, excellent. And here again, this one's nice to show you that big carnassial up here to really see that shearing tooth. That's very important. I guarantee you can see it in your own dog. Probably see it in your cat if she's nicer than my cat is. We also have a modern fox, so relatively smaller, more gracile, so more gentle forms, I guess you could say, not as robust. And we see again, let's see, that is these carnassials. This one illustrates it pretty well. So these teeth here working together are the carnassials. And again, we've got a longer, more narrow snout here. This one is actually one from Japan. I don't know why we have a Japanese fox and not just like a Montana fox in collections. And then we also have a few modern dogs. So here is a modern dog skull. So again, I'm not quite sure what breed, but you can see that modern domesticated dogs have been artificially selected to look different than what we see in our wild dogs. And a lot of that does have to do with the relative height, that we see more of a sloping, inflated sinuses here, usually a shorter snout. And then one that I love to show off because people think it's a weird, creepy alien baby is actually this skull right here. This is a pug skull, but a puppy pug skull. So one that honestly may have never actually been born. So it's a very strange alien looking, and we can see this strange increase of encephalization that we've artificially selected for. So this huge bulbous like monkey brain. And then what's also interesting is that with pugs and other short-faced dogs, we've selected for their snout to be very highly reduced, making it so that they have a constant underbite, and that they also tend to have issues with their sinuses because all of that anatomy has been selected to go up towards their face. Yeah, you took essentially this and made it into this. Yeah, which, woo, man, sorry, pugs. Artificial dog selection is, I think, fascinating. It's kind of like a controlled way of controlling some aspects of evolution. So that's something I'm hoping to learn more about with all of these dogs as well, is understanding what humans have done to modern dogs and why. So I am more than happy to take some questions now. Does it make the most sense for me to read through them?
Oh, it's easier if we can just, I can run through the questions for you.
Okay.
That way you're not like scrolling through everything.
I don't know.
And so some of the questions are usually answered and some are not. So we'll just go through. We'll start off with an easy one as far as, what is the favorite dog that you have studied?
Oh, well, this one. I'm super biased. It's the most spectacular specimen I've probably ever seen, too. I mean, again, I've never seen something that has everything so well preserved. I'm coming from finding an isolated tooth and being really excited about that. So to have like an entire skull has been really spectacular. And then I love Tephra out of the John Day fossil beds as well. It's a really neat fossil dog in the same size category as this one. So go John Day fossil beds.
How big is the biggest canine?
Ooh, how big is the biggest canine? Pretty sure it's a wolf. I'm pretty sure, well, do they mean modern or extinct? Dire wolves were bigger than modern wolves, but not to quite the same proportion that I believe that show, what was it, Game of Thrones, made them out to be. Yes, Freya. Hi. Yes, Freya is now being very needy. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Jeff, if you have a stat on that one in particular too. But I'm pretty sure the dire wolves were larger than modern wolves, but not by, I think they would still, the averages of each would probably overlap to a degree. So we're still talking about a big gray wolf, like the larger end of a gray wolf size range, I believe. Again, I don't know my modern dogs nearly as well as my dead ones. So it can inspire you to go look it up and relate back with the information.
I know my mom has a horse of a dog. It's her Tibetan Mastiff, and that is a giant animal.
Oh my gosh. My brother has a Newfoundland, and it's like 180 pounds. He wouldn't leave the car one time, and we couldn't get him out. It was just like, well, okay.
What is your favorite modern dog?
Oh man. Wow. These are things my favorite modern dog is Freya, my dog. Oh, very much. And group of dogs, I love maned wolves. They're a South American dog. They're not truly wolves, and they've got really long legs. They're really leggy, and they have the weirdest sounds that they make. Like, they can't full on howl or bark like dogs. So they've got this like, yeah, it, like, you Google it. It's so funny. They just make these hilarious, like, kind of screaming noises.
So on your picture where you had divided up the carnivora, how is a walrus related to a bear?
Isn't that crazy? They're actually very closely related. So walruses are in a group called pinnipeds, and that includes your seals and sea lions and walruses. And they are, I don't know about you guys, but when I see a seal, I'm like, that is a dog in the ocean. Like, it looks like a dog, right? Like, and we had our executive director came from a museum that was on the coast of somewhere on the East Coast. And he was like, oh yeah, we had dogs of the sea as an exhibit once. And I went, yeah, seals and sea lions. And he was like, what are you talking about? Like, I meant like Portuguese water dogs and stuff. And I was like, whoops. I got that part wrong. Oh, and now I totally forgot what the question was.
Just how walrus was related to bears.
So yeah, if we go back, and if I could go back, or if you Google that bear family tree by Ray Troll, it'll show it on there as pinnipeds are a branch of carnivorans that are pretty close to both bears and dogs. Bears and dogs are still more closely related to each other than they are to those groups, but the next group out. So like a walrus is more closely related to a bear than it is to a cat, but they are all carnivorans. But a walrus, but dogs and bears are still more closely related to each other than to a walrus. I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
I'll throw up the skull of a leopard seal too, because they have amazing looking teeth.
Oh, they do. And then crab-eating seals' teeth.
The crab-eating seals, yeah.
Oh, exactly. Those give me butterflies. I would like. I don't have any tattoos, but maybe of their teeth. It's spectacular.
Let's see. We have. Did prehistoric dogs chew their food?
Well, based on the proof is in the pooping, marginally. A little bit. They definitely, I mean, they were chewing it like you saw in that clip of the hyena. I mean, there's like slight chewing going on, but I think there's quite a bit of ingesting of big chunks as well. And we know that again because we have their fossil feces and we can look at their fossil poop and see that they still had pretty big chunks. So I would recommend to chew your food better than your dog does.
This one might be good for Jeff and Clint as well. So we have groups of mammals getting divided out into different categories. So we've got the carnivoras and the carnivores, or carnivorans. How about groups of herbivores? Any plant-eating sections?
Well, within carnivora, the most plant-eating one is the panda bear, just kind of being a disgrace to pandas and bears everywhere, really, in my humble opinion. But good for them, they're adorable. So that is one of the few, well, I guess then we'd also have red pandas. They also eat a very bamboo-heavy diet. So within carnivora, I think those two are the two I know about being most vegetarian. But I'm also up for learning about other hilarious, weird vegetarian critters, or talking about how a lot of herbivorous animals are not really true herbivores. They also eat animals when they can. So when I say a panda doesn't eat meat, it does, just not as its main staple. And just when we say a deer eats plants, yeah, it does, but occasionally it'll eat a mouse too, so.
So then following that question, we have one of, are there any dogs that eat grass? And I don't know of any specific breeds of dog or anything because they're very carnivorous, but I do have a dog that eats grass and then probably throws it up.
Yep, I have a dog that also will sit outside and eat grass and then will hack it up. And I'm like, cool, why did you do that? I don't know if that's a nutritional deficiency thing, like they're not getting in their pet chow kind of thing. Though modern dogs are also going to, that one's eating grass too, huh? There are some groups of dogs that will eat, I mean, like coyotes will eat a really wide range of things, including like berries and twigs, and I think they'll eat some grassy material as well. So I do think that there's some ancestral reason for our dogs to want to eat grass, but for whatever reason, they seem to do it to the point where they get sick. So I'm not I would love to talk to a vet about that, honestly, and be like, why is my dog doing this? And my cat does it too, and she's like they're pure carnivores. She's not even, I'm like, why are you eating grass? Your teeth are worthless for this. So, good questions.
That and coprophagy too. Dogs, why? Why?
Especially the cat poop. Why are they like little Tootsie Rolls? It's
Cat
so
treats. Cat
To
treats.
keep the cat litter box like barricaded away from the dog. It's disgusting. Ugh. But yes,
We have a fence around ours too.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how MOR 8673 died?
That's a really good question. How did 8673 die? Especially since we knew it was a young dog and in really good health. Well, based on its skull. There obviously could have been something. We did not recover any other part of the skeleton. It was just that skull. So we don't have all of the lines of evidence. The site where it's deposited is in a silty, sandy, probably flood deposit that's been sourced with a lot of volcanic rock. So it probably, and that would also make sense as to why very few like full skeletons come out of this site, more isolated material, that it was buried probably in a rapid, maybe flooding event or mass wasting event, or, did have an ailment somewhere along the other parts of its body and then died along a riverbank or a muddy part of a river that then got deposited with more of that really ash-rich mud. But we do know that the site is, they're not articulated as specimens. So I'd say it's high enough energy that it could have probably been more of a river environment, really, is what I'd say. And I should know more because we're writing up the geochronology. So we have to write about all the rock types. So I will report back when I check in with my geology co-authors on what exactly deposited that unit.
So you had mentioned the auditory bullas. Are there any bones in the ear?
Yeah. Yes, there are bones in the ear, specifically in the middle ear, mammals. So one of the things that makes us mammals, besides having fur and drinking milk, happens to be our inner ear, our middle ear bones that used to be a part of our jaw when we were weird reptile-y things, because that's weird. I don't understand it. I did at one point. And so what defining thing that we look at mammals, especially mammals in the Mesozoic, when we're trying to go, is this a true mammal or is this like this weird synapsid thing? A lot of things that we look at are the ears that are bones that migrated from the jaw into the ear to be reallocated there. So within the middle ear in humans and all mammals, you have the three bones. You have the inca, the stapes, and the malleolus, and they're all very, very tiny. So you're very rarely going to recover them in a fossil setting unless it's very well preserved. And then what's also really neat about what you can do with the inner ear and going on in there. So you might be familiar with the fact that you have semicircular canals in your ears, and that's what's helping you stay balanced and when you run and exactly. A lot of having to do with behavior and locomotion. And so you can look at a fossil, and one of the things we're looking to do with this fossil is to actually use a CT scan, so use those really fancy x-rays in a way, to go through and segment out the semicircular canals within the preserved ear to get an idea of the size and the angle, which can tell us about behavior. So the inner ear is really, and the inner and middle ear are very important for learning about how animals are related to each other and understanding their behavioral things, like how fast could they run, and those sorts of aspects.
I just want to throw out a brief apology to my dad. So speaking of the inner ear and whatnot, so we've got these little hairs, little cilia that sit in a gelatinous section on the inside of the ear. And when we're young, these hairs bend and move and flex really, really easily. And when we get older, they start to stiffen up a little bit. So you take a little bit more recovery time. And I made my dad go on tons of roller coasters. And now my kid is making me go on roller coasters. And I got off the roller coaster the first time and went, I am so sorry, Dad. I am so sorry. Because I'm not recovering as fast anymore.
Oh my gosh, wow, that's Good thing I never made my parents go on that many roller coasters, I guess. Just like rock concerts or whatever. Weird Al Yankovic in 7th grade, you know. What? Ears are cool.
Yeah. How small is the smallest prehistoric dog?
Oh, so I'm pretty sure that would go to Hesperocyon, one of the earliest Hesperocyonines. So we might have one, that first photo dog I showed. So its skull is about this big. And I'm pretty sure that's on the smaller size range. So a skull that big, we're talking about a little bit smaller than a fox. We're talking about probably between the size of a house cat and a fox of being that smallest dog. And I do think that, again, I don't know the canines as well, but there's a great resource out there called Dogs, Their Evolutionary History. It's by Wang, Tedford, and Antone. And it goes into a lot of the diversity that we see within the groups, and they go and they talk about the smallest and the biggest, and it's a popular media book. It's meant for all ages. So I do have to plug that great resource, because I do think there was, after Leptocyon, I do believe that there may have been another really, really small modern canine as well that would have been smaller than a fox. So adorable, so cute, which is really why I study most things.
So just a clarification for some of our audience, like, did any of these ancient dogs run into dinosaurs?
Oh, that is a great question. I need to be better about that. They ran into birds, so yes, but they did not live. I work at Museum of the Rockies, where I get chewed out if I say, then the dinosaurs went extinct. No, they didn't, birds. And I'm like, okay, guys, I get it. So technically they interacted with birds, and those are dinosaurs. But by the time dogs evolved, so if we say that earliest dog is about 36 million years old, dinosaurs, non-avian, dinosaurs went extinct 66 million years ago. So this is about 25, 30 million years later. Once kind of the entire ecosystem has been flattened, and mammals have now been able, thanks to that warming trend in the Eocene, they've really radiated out into all that open niche space by all those dead dinosaurs. So these dogs would not have interacted with dinosaurs as we think of them, but they did interact with birds, which are modern dinosaurs.
All right, so again with the MOR 8673, is there any way to tell if it was done growing, like if it had reached full size, or if it was still growing?
That is a great question. Man, I have a background in human anthropology, so excuse me if my references are human related. But essentially, we know that this dog was fully grown, because when we look at certain aspects of the jaw and teeth, nope, Freya, you gotta lay down. We see, I'm sorry, the dog is being very, very needy, which is telling. This is funny. So how do we know if a specimen's full grown or not? The fastest way to know if a specimen is full grown or not is to look at their teeth. The last tooth that erupts in mammals is your third molar, right? Your wisdom teeth. Mine came up 16, 17, got them yanked out right then. Sometimes folks are earlier, some folks are a little bit later than that. So when we look at this lower dog jaw, I told you it has all of its teeth preserved, including its M3s, which they have on their lowers, right? Not on their uppers. So these M3s, which look like little buttons, they're so cute, are fully erupted. And that tells me that those are the adult teeth, because you don't get a baby M3, that those are the adult teeth. And it's fully erupted, so we know that it is at least old enough. What I don't know is if it was at full skeletal maturity. So with people, we don't finish fusing and growing until a little bit later after our teeth are done. So humans, I think the last thing to ossify is your sternum area. Your ribs are joining your sternum, and that's in like your mid to late 20s that you experience that, but your teeth are already fully erupted by then. So this dog, by its teeth, was fully grown. And how I also know that is, this one doesn't show it very well because it's painted, but we can look at the sutures, so the connection between your bones and your skull, and see how well sutured they are, versus if they're older, you won't even necessarily be able to see that suture. If they're younger, like bringing back the creepy baby skull of the creepy pug baby. These are the bones of the skull that are not fully fused yet. And so we could look at that part and know that we're dealing with a very, very young individual. So I use sutures and teeth to get an idea of age.
All right, so with our canines, do you know what the earliest date is with man interacting with dogs?
Oh, that is such a good question. I have friends who study this. Like, can I relate you to them? Jeff, Clint, do either of you know when the first, like, I think it's, we're talking like 15 to 20,000 years ago, somewhere between 10 and 20,000 years ago. We don't have, even modern dog genetics indicate that it may have happened multiple times at many stages. So it's hard to tie it back to like one wolf ancestor. So from what I've seen, it's mostly using artifacts, and an artifact has to be well preserved and discovered to be able to know for sure the age on that. So I'm gonna say it's at least past 10,000 years. But I don't think there is a really solid date on it. It's something that's still very actively studied. It's a very interesting interaction, and a good one for us.
Since dogs are considered relatively smart, is there any relation between skull size and brain functions? Like you were talking about the expanding of the sinus section.
Oh, excellent. That would be an interesting study. I don't know enough about dog intelligence off the top of my head, and it would be hard to say with so much selective artificial breeding that humans have done to know what is natural versus what we've selected for within some of our really smart dogs, like border collies and stuff like that, tend to be very quick. But what we would be able to definitely look at is one of the things that you can do with CT scans is, so you essentially digitally slice up a skeleton or a specimen, and then you can go through those slices and you can fill in the voids. And then when you're done filling in all the voids, at the end you have an endocast, which is for the skull, mostly you're gonna be doing that for the brain. So what we could do with these CT scans is to go and segment out an endocast of the brain, and then we could look at the relative proportions of areas of the skull. And what I bet we would see in dogs is a pretty big olfactory portion, whereas primates like us, we've reduced our olfactory portion. We've really increased our seeing and hearing. We've really limited our olfactory, and we can see that in our CT scans. And dogs, I would be curious about, is it intelligence or is it just emphasis on a particular necessary sensory system? And if so, how would we tease that apart? But I think that would be really, really fascinating, and whoever asked should go into the field and figure it out for us. That'd be great.
You had mentioned red pandas before. Where do red pandas come in, and how are they related to cats, dogs, and bears?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think they're more closely related to, oh God, now I want to Google this. Where do they fall? Are they closely related to raccoons?
Skunks and raccoons. It's a little undecided where they go related to skunks, mephidids, and raccoons, procyonids, but they're up there closer to those guys. So a little closer to bears than to dogs, but even more closely related to raccoons and skunks.
And then how about weasels?
Well, weasels are, I'd have to go back to that original thing I was just looking at here too.
They'd be up in that area too.
Yeah. I want to say that all those guys are all in the caniforma side of things. Things that are more closely related to cats are going to be going into your like a mongoose or a fossa. Is it fossa? 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 Fossa.
Fossa.
Making
like the cats. The feliforms are like the herpestids, which are the down in Africa, the mongoose, the hyenas, and the cats. And there's not many in that feliform.
And the bitterungs, right? Those really.
Those are so cool.
Yeah, they're so cool.
Watch I saw a little YouTube video of them played in reverse, and it looks like a herd sauropods running
I
across
saw
your
that
screen.
one. I loved that one. It was great. Yeah, I think I reshared that. And I love all these taxonomy questions, though. This is the stuff that I'm fascinated with. Like, how are all these things related to each other? So, still figuring it out.
So we have one for Hesperocyon that Jeff and Clint may be able to chime in on as well. Have only skull bones been found of Hesperocyon, or has there been any postcrania?
I'm pretty sure there's been postcrania. As far as I know, here in Montana, we don't have any postcrania, but I'm fairly certain, please correct me if I'm wrong, that there's quite a bit of Hesperocyene material known from the Dakotas and Nebraska, and more complete material in those cases. I feel like I heard that about Badlands National Park, but I could be not remembering correctly.
We do have postcrania. The problem is identifying it. It's difficult to associate the crania with the postcrania. So if you find just an isolated bone, it can be very difficult to associate it with a Hesperocyene because get us in the generic
Right.
dog.
What was that limb bone we recovered? The one that I got to prep out. What was that related to? It was the dog arm.
Yeah,
we don't know yet.
If I remember what you were talking about, but we can probably get it to dog, but that's about it.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
our rocks here in North Dakota, our Oligocene rocks, we actually have a really high diversity of Hesperocyones. And they're our most common carnivore that we get here in North Dakota are our Hesperocyene dogs. We get a lot of Hesperocyon, and I know at other places there's full skeletons of Hesperocyon that are known. We also get Mesocyon, which we have that really great specimen where we've got a full skull and almost a complete postcranial skeleton, which the postcranial skeleton hasn't been described for Mesocyon, so that's something that we have some researchers working on now. We also get Osbornodon, which is originally known from here in North Dakota, and there's a little bit of postcrania known with that, but for the most part, it's almost all teeth, and mostly isolated teeth. Once in a while, a lower jaw, and then maybe an upper jaw now and then. So.
All right, I think we've chewed through most of our questions here, ones that hadn't been answered anyways. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
This was so fun. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy just chatting at the end here too. Just like, all right, let's talk about who knows what, you know? It's good stuff.
All right, so next week, as a reminder for our watchers, we're changing things up a little bit. We're no longer going Monday through Friday with the streaming. We are reducing these to Tuesdays and Thursdays, still at 10 a.m. And next Tuesday, you're just going to have to suffer with me. I will be chatting about flight invertebrates. So we'll be comparing birds, bats, and pterosaurs and the differences in how they flew and how they solved the problem of flight. So that'll be next Tuesday, not Monday, nothing on Monday, next Tuesday at 10 a.m. All right. Thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your day.